Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Suns and Shadows. This time you're with Jeff, and we're going to be talking about The Penguin, Episode 1. All right, everybody. So we're back with The Penguin. It's a follow-up to the Batman, the movie with Matt Reeves. And initial opinions on the movie. I know my wife got me this pretty cool sign here when we were on a trip one time, and totally love the sign. And while I enjoy the movie, I do acknowledge it does run a bit long and the third act kind of falls apart. But one of the standout parts of the Batman is the Penguin, actually. The Riddler takes a very different approach, and it's referenced very much in this first episode. But ultimately, Colin Ferrel as the Penguin, he eliminates any references to previous comic book iterations he's played in the past. And we're talking about one. And if you're on point and you hit that bullseye, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that said, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Penguin Season 1, Episode 1. All right, guys, what we're talking about with this one, and I went into this thinking like, how are you actually going to do another show about the Penguin? We kind of got this a little bit in Gotham with the Penguin, the Riddler, and a bunch of other like villains. That was largely supposed to be a James Gordon show, which ended up being a Batman show without Batman in it. And then we've had various iterations of Batman, the Rogues Gallery for years since then. And this is our first foray back into like a kind of a high quality HBO version of the Batverse. How do I want to phrase that? The Batverse, Bat Universe? I don't know. What do y'all think? But when it comes to this, Colin Ferrel did stand out in the Batman. He just wasn't as much in the movie as you might have thought. I mean, it was already front loaded with Falcone and the Riddler. So we were dealing with that for the most part. And, Penguin was just kind of a background character at times, but Colin Ferrel nailed it in the movie, in my opinion. I thought he did really good. And so we're basically getting the show as the follow-up set in the same universe. And apparently, according to James Gunn, this is kind of Elseworlds. So this kind of stands on its own and they ain't going to tinker with it. Whether we get more beyond this season or not is another question. But as far as the good goes, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started off with Colin Ferrel. I think he was fucking outstanding in this first episode. He clearly has the character down. He's got enough nuance to him and range to him that he's not going too crazy yet. And when I get to the bad about this, I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off when I say what I'm going to say. But that said, this is an Italian mafia kind of story, so you're getting a bunch of the underworld. I like that kind of thing. I love The Godfather. I love Goodfellas. And seeing that now in the Bat universe works very well. The city looks great. Gotham looks great. They really reference the movie. Now, if you're worried about whether this really catches up on the movie, how much of a recap you're going to get, you can count this recap in less than like 2 goddamn fucking minutes, as opposed to something like, say, Agatha that spends a whole episode recapping what happened in WandaVision so you understand what's going on in the show. This one touches on the movie basically in the first few minutes. And then that's it. This is a straight follow-up to the Batman, and you don't need to see the Batman to understand what's going on. Now, largely, we'll get to some of those other points in a minute, but largely this kicks off in a very good fashion. It hits the points that you need to understand from the Batman movie where, Carmine is dead, the events that happened, the flooding of part of Gotham, and what's going on in the criminal underworld. And so basically what we have here is, the Penguin assuming a little bit of a power vacuum as Carmine's now dead. And now I don't know how much you want to get into spoilers, but what, fuck it. If you haven't seen it by now, that's kind of going to be up to you. I'm not going to get too spoilery, but he assumes that power vacuum and, he gets insulted and he takes care of a problem almost real quick before it gets to the first opening credit kind of like, you're watching the Penguin. And it's totally fucking funny. I totally appreciate it. There's a good sense of humor in this show. So when you're talking about the good of this show, we're talking about Colin Farrell is nailing it. The dialogue is pretty tight, and there's enough comedic elements in this. I found myself laughing like almost every few minutes at some either line or somebody getting killed or somebody getting shot at or some sort of storyline beat. There's a fun sense of humor to this that I wasn't exactly expecting. I was expecting this to be a little more like, I guess, serious to a point, and it doesn't really do that. I mean, it is very serious, and it does treat everybody like bad motherfuckers. So you're getting like the vigilant, you're getting like the villains, and you're seeing how they're kind of assuming their final form, so to speak. Like if you're playing a video game, you're going through stages of a boss battle. We're now in like stage 2 of the Penguin. We're not seeing like young Penguin like we saw on the Gotham TV show, which I liked that show, but the last 2 seasons were very disappointing. But that said, you know, I like the Riddler and the Batman in that show. And while I like the Riddler and the Batman, the Penguin stood out the most for me. Colin Farrell's doing a great job. And so when you're talking about the good of this first episode, the pacing is really good. It's like an hour and 7 minutes long. I mean, with credits. And so when the show is over with after an hour and 7 minutes, you feel like, wait, that was a fucking hour? That only felt like it was about 35 minutes long. So that's a credit to the pacing, the storytelling. I feel like the narratives is really on point. I feel like the writers nailed this first episode, and that's what you need to do with shows like this. You have to hit the ground running in the first episode. You can't meander for like 30, 45 fucking minutes recapping something you really don't fucking need. Just get to the fucking story. That's all anybody gives a shit about. And they do that here. So credit to the writers. You know, and HBO and Max, they're prestige TV. They do not like to put shit on their fucking app, as evidenced by Batman Cape Crusader, which is on Prime, the J.J. Abrams animated series. They were not confident in that. It was originally intended to be a Max series. They were ultimately decided, you know, we're not going to do that. We're going to ship it. We're going to shop this around. Anybody else who wants to air it, have at it. But this isn't up to the quality that Max requires. This show, clearly from the word go, has the budget, it has the writing, it has the acting performances. Like, you get introduced to Alberto Carmine like pretty immediately in this, and he's taking over for his dad. But the real Carmine to be afraid of is Sophia, and she is fucking scary as shit. She's fucking nuts. She's fresh out of Arkham Asylum, and she's now back in charge of the Carmine family. Now that at the end of the episode, you find out what happens with Alberto, notwithstanding. But when you get Sophia going on, and whenever she shows up, it feels like, oh, that's an unpredictable to this show, which I really like. Provides an element of chaos without providing any other number of villains, which if we're solely focusing on Penguin in this show, that is what we need to focus on. That and the criminal underground, because you see, when you get introduced to Vic, the secondary character to Penguin, basically it looks like he's going to be his like lieutenant, his right-hand man. And Vic is basically our walk into this underground world. And we're starting to see like how all the functions work. And this is very well grounded. It reminds me a little bit of, say, the Punisher show on Netflix, where you got to see a bit more gritty, little more dirty, little not so nice and pretty. And you see Penguin teaching him like, hey, you ain't a dumb kid, but we need to get you up to speed. Like, can you do this or can you not do this? And by the end of the episode, you find out what Vic chooses. And it's very important at that point. It's very poetic. It's a good character arc. You're making us care about other characters in this fucking show. Storytelling 101, everybody. Make people care about your fucking characters, even if they're villains. Now, this doesn't go as wild as, say, like Todd Phillips' Joker does, where that's like a completely like whole different animal. This gives you bad Penguin, crazy Penguin and real Penguin in there. Like, you get part of his backstory, you get part of his life, you meet his mom. And when you meet his mother, at first you're like, oh God, we're doing this shit again. And even I was afraid of that because she's off her medication, but she ends up having one of the pivotal scenes in this whole fucking show so far. Like, she totally convinces Penguin, like, you do what you got to do. Stop being a goddamn fucking baby. No running, no hiding. Do what you need to do. You're like, you need to control your own goddamn life, control your own narrative. And that was so awesome to see. And after that, you felt like the tone of the episode change, and it assumed like this aggressiveness, like, you know what? I'm kind of rooting for fucking Penguin here. And then you see what happens, and it's totally fun. I'm trying to stay a little non-spoilerish so people can get an opportunity to watch this. If you want a little more breakdowns, there's other channels out there. Snarky J, girl, fantastic review. Just saying. But if this is just me, I could not sit back and just be like, you know what? I'll just wait for our live stream on Saturday night to talk about this. I'm like, I want to fucking talk about this right fucking now. So fucking awesome show. Now, when you're getting to the bad, the only bad parts about this are, I don't know if I like the inclusion of like modern pop songs in this. I like soundtracks like that. It's totally fine, but it feels like you're trying a little too hard to bring this in to the real world. And not that I didn't like Promise You, and anybody who's seen this episode, when that hits, I fucking laughed. I ain't gonna lie, I enjoyed it, but it did feel out of place. So when they're including like some pop songs in here, it's like, even 80s retro songs like I Promise You. Like, that's a Napoleon Dynamite song as far as I'm concerned. But like, you know, you could do your nods. That maybe kind of pulled me out just a tick. And then ultimately, you know, as far as like anything else goes that's on the bad side, I'd say, if anything, God, what did I write down here? Sorry, everybody. I'm just doing this live to record. I ain't going to clip nothing out. But as far as like anything bad goes, other than introducing a bunch of characters I've never known about, they actually did a pretty good job, like giving them an actual story. Bad, I can see how some can look at this and be like, wow, this is just totally like a Sopranos ripoff. Now, if you're thinking that, you're not going to unthink that by watching this show. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen The Sopranos, and I've actually seen it as recently as last year. If you feel like this is a Sopranos version of the Penguin, I think you're fucking ignorant. You need to get off that horse, because this is not fucking Sopranos. While it has elements very similar to Sopranos, this is not fucking Sopranos. This is the Penguin fucking with multiple criminal families. He is not part of any particular family. He's his own fucking penguin. Let's get that fucking straight. So if you think he's fucking Tony Soprano, get off your fucking high horse, watch a different fucking show, because it's just going to piss you off. What they did in this show is unique enough for me while referencing other quality properties. I felt like vibes of Godfather. I felt like vibes of Goodfellas. I felt vibes of like, you know, every other thing out there while it's being its own thing. I didn't feel it was ripping anything off. However, I can see how some will look at that and be like, you know, this is too much like Sopranos. Hey, that's kind of a you thing. If that's how you feel, fine. But don't beat down this show. We haven't seen more than one episode so far. There's more episodes to come. My question is going to be how they stick the landing on this. They have to stick the landing. Like the next now these next few episodes, they can kind of do as they want. How they finally end this is going to be the greatest concern of all. Like, if you can't tell a cohesive story in the episodes that they've chosen to do for this series, if they can't stick the goddamn landing, I'll be the first one to be, well, this started off great, but boy, did it end like shit. I will be that first person to say that. However, that said, this first episode, it gives good vibes. I know early other reviews have said the show is pretty mid. I don't feel that. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm pretty excited for this. Now, as far as anything else that's kind of bad, there are some bit characters in here that feel like they need a little more experience and seasoning. The actor who plays Vic in this, by the end of the episode, it felt like he was getting comfortable in his role. Sophia was doing good, but I'm seeing some other actors in here. One of the Falcone heads, Chrome Dome, he's from House of Cards. I forgot his actor name. Don't shit on me for that. Put it in a comment below. Whatever. He feels like he's a little bit shoehorned in here. It should just be all Sophia at that point. I feel like we might be getting just a tick too complicated with a bit of the hierarchy, but it's fine. As long as we don't start getting to say like Court of Owls and other crazy bullshit. As long as we stay in this lane, I think eventually we'll be all right. Like, let's not introduce any more of the families in Gotham that are in this criminal underworld. We already got the Salvatores and the Carmines. Let's just keep it to that. Let's keep it simple. Let's not get too complicated. That's another concern as far as any sort of bad parts is I can see if they get a little too greedy with, hey, let's get more and more into the criminal underworld here. No, you can reference it. Let's keep it basic, keep it simple, stupid. So far, I feel like we're going to be okay, but the next episode or two will tell us like how convoluted and complicated this show might get and how important Penguin is to the story. This is his story. I don't want to see him become a background character to it. That is another fear that this could happen with this show. As far as anything ugly in this, it's not really an ugly. I think they did a great job designing Oswald Cobblepot. The ugly part is they did name him Oswald Cobb. They dropped the pot from it. I know the interview that just came out, the little red carpet segment, whatever. Oh, we wanted to reduce his name based on a comic book reference. You know, they always wanted to shorten his name. You know what? Fuck that. His name is Oswald fucking Cobblepot. He doesn't have to be the Danny DeVito character from Batman Returns where he comes from, where he was adopted by a rich family. We don't need that. That's okay. We're fine with that. As far as I'm concerned, though, his name is fucking Oswald Cobblepot. You don't need to short it to Oswald Cobb. But his name is Oswald. It is referenced multiple times. They just call him Oz for short as a nickname. I don't have a problem with that part. But it does take you out whenever they say the last name Cobb. A little bit for me anyway. But it's not enough to pull me out of the episode entirely. It's just like, that's not quite right. But that's kind of the Batman fan in me. So that being said, what am I going to give this episode out of 5 umbrellas? I'm going to give this a 4.5 umbrellas out of 5. I had a lot of fun. The action is tight. The editing is very good. The pacing is excellent. I feel the direction was on point. The acting was really good for the most part. I just take points off for soundtrack and some of the ancillary characters not being up to the level when Colin Farrell's in a scene with them, but that's okay. Eventually they'll get into the groove of their own particular characters, and I'm enjoying the show so far. And hey, if all of you want this to be more of a live stream post show, I want to hear about it because this show airs on Thursdays, and we're relatively free to do such a thing. And if anybody wants to join us, if you're a fellow channel or you just love the Batman and you like talking about this and you're interested in the show, hey, even if you don't like the show, I want your opinion too. You know, put a comment down below, message us, whatever is totally cool. And as far as I'm concerned, Batman episode 1 on HBO Max, that's going to get a double thumbs up from me and a 4.5 out of 5 umbrellas. And that is how we're going to rate this shit, bitches. So that's the good, the bad, the ugly of the Penguin episode 1 starring Colin Farrell. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell notification so you can stay tuned to when we come back. The Penguin Show.